Welcome back to Fashion here. So today I want to do the second half of my series looking at the drivers and their expected points scores since the year 2000. So a couple days ago, I basically did the bottom 20 drivers, those who had basically dropped the most points compared to what was expected of them based on their starting position, based on how strong their car is. And today's the top 20. So these are the 20 best drivers in the last 20 years, basically for their career totals for points above expected. So starting with number 20, there's actually a couple of drivers in the first five that we'll be going over that are, maybe a bit of a surprise to see them there. But again, couple fluke results here and there, and especially if you don't have too many seasons, it's definitely not too hard to get on that list. So a couple things I just want to note before we start. So everything is standardized for the 25-point system. No points for fastest lap, no points for sprints either. And also, this is a model that takes into account mechanical reliability. It also takes into account it tries to take into account really crazy races like the 2005 US Grand Prix, just for example. So starting right away with number 20, and that is Jos Verstappen. 3 seasons in this time frame, and over those 3 seasons, points above expected 20.8 or 159%. 2 of those 3 seasons were above 100%, with his best season being 2000, where he was plus 17.7 or 256%. Worst season 2003, negative 2.8 or 51%, driving the minority that year. Moving on to number 19, a driver that maybe if you're a bit younger, you would probably know, at least compared to Jos Verstappen. But number 19 is Kamui Kobayashi. 4 seasons in Formula One with a career total of a positive 21.1 or 121%. 2 of those 4 seasons above 100%, with his best season being 2011, positive 11.8 or 165%. Worst season, the following season, negative 0.8, but honestly, not too bad. It comes out as 99%, and if that's your worst season in F1, you're probably pretty good in the races. Number 18, Carlos Sainz, our first current driver on this list. 11 seasons, including this one. Points above expected over his entire career, plus 21.49. When you take that as a percentage, 102%. And 5 of those 11 seasons are above 100%. His best season coming in 2019, positive 29.8 or 145%. Worst season, a couple of seasons later, the first season, these ground effect regulations, 2022, where Sainz was a negative 18.7 or 92%. Number 17, another bit of an oldie here, Juan Pablo Montoya. 6 seasons in Formula One, and over those 6 seasons, 25.1 points above expected for 103%. 3 seasons above 100%, with his best season being 2004, where he was a plus 35 or 132%. Worst season, unfortunately, the following year, his first season at McLaren, a negative 30.1 or 83%. Now, moving on to number 16, another driver who is a bit of a surprise here, you wouldn't necessarily expect to be on this list, is Mika Salo. 2 seasons, 2000, 2002, both of them being over 100% for a career total of positive 25.8 or 137%. That better those 2 seasons, 2022 or not 2022, 2002, positive 13 or 162%. But to be honest, the other season, 2000s, not far behind with positive 12.8 or 126%. Number 15, I would say probably the last big surprise on this list is Eddie Irvine. 3 seasons on basically in this time frame, 2000, 2001, 2002, and all those together a positive 26.8 or 127%. 2 of those 3 seasons above 100%, with his best season coming in 2002, oddly enough his final year in F1, where he was a positive 15.9 or 153%. Worst season, 2000, a negative 3.6 or 92%. I think these 2 drivers, Eddie Irvine, Mika Salo, honestly I would put Jos Verstappen in there as well. If I did this for their season in the 1990s, Some of them not so good, especially looking at you, Eddie Irvine. I think for sure some of these drivers would not be on the top 20, but they would just end up getting replaced with other drivers who had, a couple of seasons here and there where, they did pretty well, especially later in their careers. Now, number 14, I think, is our first real big heavy hitter, although I guess Juan Pablo Montoya, you can consider him, a big heavy hitter as well. But number 14 is Nico Rosberg. 11 seasons in Formula One, positive 27.0 points above expected for 102% for his career total. 8 of those 11 seasons above 100%, with his best season coming in 2009, his last season at Williams, positive 20.4 or 127%. Worst season, actually second year at Mercedes, negative 22.5 or 80%. Bit of a surprise to me that none of the Mercedes seasons where he was, the Mercedes was actually a really strong car. His last 4 seasons in Formula One, I'm kind of surprised that seasons like 2015 weren't the worst season just from a raw value perspective. But it turns out that when you can factor in qualifying, that kind of thing, mechanical issues, then the season was actually not quite as bad. And when you do the math, the 2011 one ends up looking a little worse. Number 13, a driver who would end up driving for the same team as Nico Rosberg, and eventually, they obviously would basically eventually partner Nico Rosberg's great rival Lewis Hamilton, and that is George Russell. 7 seasons in Formula One, positive 35.8 is his career total for 105%. 4 of his 7 seasons above 100%, with his best season coming in 2024, the one we just completed, a positive 28.3 or 114%. Worst season 2020, which you may look at that on the surface and be a bit confused as to how that would be the case given he was driving such a slow Williams. But unfortunately, that one race for Mercedes at the Sakir Grand Prix, starting on second on the front row of the grid, starting P2, but unfortunately the race result was basically thrown away from him by very shoddy pit stops by the Mercedes crew. So total for the whole season ends up being a negative 16.6 or 11%, even though the vast overwhelming majority of that negative result was basically down to the Mercedes pit crew. Now, number 12, Mika Hakkinen, 2 seasons in this time frame. I know we did quite a few more in the 90s, but the data I have only goes to the year 2000. And again, looking at basically the best drivers of the past quarter century. Points above expected, positive 38.9 or 111%. Both seasons above 100%, with the better of the two being the 2000 season, positive 28.5 or 112%. 2001 still on the positive, plus 10.4 or 109%, but definitely worse than the year before. And again, haven't watched the season yet on F1 TV, but again, many people talk about, Hakkinen not having a particularly strong season. Especially in contrast to his teammate David Coulthard. But again, what this data would suggest that a lot of that struggle for Hakkinen was really down to qualifying performance, and the race performances were still not too bad. Now, moving into 11th, a driver who I was a little bit surprised to see so high up on my list, and that is Pierre Gasly. 9 seasons in Formula One, including this year, positive 43.4 for him, or 111%. 6 of his 9 seasons have been above 100%, with his best season being 2020, where he, of course, has won his only Grand Prix to date. And of course, 25 points there, that contributes a big part of that 20. That's a big part of that 23.2 or 145%. Worst season, not a big surprise. The year before, 2019, where for the whole season he was negative 10.5 or 90%. If I looked at only his his very poor 12 race run for Red Bull, likely that ends up being a much bigger negative number, looking like a negative 20 or so, negative 30 maybe. But the reality is, really good second half of the season for Toro Rosso. Gets his first podium in F1. Now obviously does a pretty good job of making up that difference. Now into the top 10 we go, and our first driver in that top 10 is Daniel Ricciardo. 14 seasons in Formula One, points above expected, positive 94.1 or 108%. 6 of those 14 seasons above 100%, so less than half of his seasons in Formula One he was above, above what he was expected. And I think really the simplest explanation for that is that, oddly enough, compared to kind of the opposite of many drivers on the list that we looked at earlier this week, where, drivers had their worst seasons in front running machinery, or at least from raw numbers perspective. For Ricciardo, he actually had his best seasons in the best cars of his career, and he generally tended to have his worst seasons in the slower ones. So Ben, some really, really strong seasons. 2014, again, that's in the best category. 2017, another really strong one. Two really, really strong seasons, and that basically is enough to basically put him very, very high on this list, even though for his own whole career, he only had 6 seasons out of 14 that were above 100%. So again, that best season, 2014, positive 67.3 or 142%. I can't say enough, 142% in a front-running car is extremely difficult to achieve, but Ricciardo in his first season at Red Bull basically managed to achieve just that. 2023's worst season, negative 20.9. Of course, he was so poor that year that McLaren basically opted to buy out the final year of his contract. And that negative 20.9 converts to 62%, which is pretty dreadful. Now, into the top 10. I guess we've already been in the top 10, so both poor choice of words on my part. Off one more spot to 9th, and that is Charles Leclerc. 8 seasons in Formula One, a career total of a positive 108.5 or 108%. Seasons above expected, 6. I should say, with the best season of this past season, 2024, a positive 35.6 or 112%. Worst season, his first season at Ferrari, 2019, with negative 10.9 or 96%. Leclerc has a reputation for being a great qualifier, not so good in the races, but the fact that 6 of his 8 seasons in his career are above 100% really actually kind of highlights the opposite, that he's actually really, really good in the races. And I think, the reality is that the reason why his pole to win ratio is so bad is that the Ferrari cars that he stuck on pole didn't really have any hope of winning those races, where over one lap pace, things like tire wear are definitely not as big of an issue as they are in the race. Now, number 8, David Coulthard. A bit of a surprise to see him so high up this list, but nonetheless did a very good job according to this data. 9 seasons in this time frame, positive 116.9 points or 114%. Seasons above 100%, 6 out of 9, with his best season coming in 2001, positive 43.5 or 126%. Worst season, his last year at McLaren, 2004, negative 14.5 or 83%. Now, number 7 is a driver who I was honestly expecting to be top 3, top 4. But then when I realized and looked at some of the data, I realized actually that he doesn't have so many seasons in the 2000s. And some of those seasons were, where he was, well past his prime. And that is none other than Michael Schumacher. 10 seasons in this time frame, positive 169.0 or 108%. 8 seasons of the 10 above 100%, so still really good there, with his best season coming in 2002, positive 52.4%, 52.4 or 116%. Worst season, 2010, the first season of his comeback, negative 36.7 or 66%. I think based on reputation alone, I think Schumacher had this reputation for being an extremely fearsome driver, very, very supremely talented. I'm not trying to say that he isn't, but before I calculated the data for kind of his reign of terror in the early 2000s with Ferrari, I was really expecting his totals to be like consistently 150 and 120%, that kind of range, which is basically where top best drivers of all time are usually at when they are in championship winning machinery. But for Schumacher, I was kind of surprised. He had a couple of seasons there like 2002, but he also had other seasons like 2003 where he was barely above 100%. So a little bit surprised on that front, but nonetheless, Schumacher is 7th on this list. I'm sure, and also, the other thing I want to say is that if you compare Schumacher to some of the other drivers ahead of him, as well as directly behind him, he does have one of the lower, season totals. Only doing 10 seasons, of course. That Mercedes stint, not so good, and that obviously pulled his totals down a bit. If you remove the Mercedes totals, he only would have been, I think, 1 or 2 places up. So again, it doesn't change things in a massive way. And again, if I were to include his data from the 90s, I think he would probably been, if I were to calculate that, probably be quite a few spots higher on this list. But I don't think he would be number 1, which again would be an interesting tidbit. So number 6, Kimi Räikkönen. A bit of a surprise to see him so high. But 19 seasons in Formula One, positive 171.3% or 106%. Seasons above 100%, 13 out of 19, so pretty good there. His best season, 2005, positive 65.4 or 131%. Worst season, 2014, not a big surprise there, negative 60.7. His first year of his second stint at Ferrari, driving the terrible Fiat car, as it was called, or 47%. But yeah, pretty terrible season by Räikkönen, but he had quite a few seasons at Lotus, at McLaren, obviously, and even later, his stints at Alfa Romeo, right at the end, he was generally scoring, above what he was expected to. So again, it makes sense he would be pretty high on this list. Number 5 is Jenson Button, 17 seasons in Formula One, positive 228.1 over his career for 114%. One of the highest on this list, especially amongst drivers who spend a lot of time in front-running machinery. Although for Button, to be honest, a lot of his, early part of his career, his cars were quite awful. But did get some better cars later on, like in the early 2010s. 14 seasons above 100%, so pretty good there. Best season 2004, plus 59.6 or 141%. Worst season 2010, a negative 18.2, but still 92%, not too bad there. And I think for that season, I think he had a single race where he got torpedoed by Vettel at the Belgian Grand Prix. So if you basically just remove that single race, he would be much closer to 100% right there. So moving on into the top 4, and number 4 is Lewis Hamilton. 19 seasons in F1 so far, including this one. Career total of positive 285.6. Or 106%. Seasons above 100%, 13, with his best season coming in 2014, a positive 55.3 or 118%. Worst season, not a big surprise, 2011, negative 36.3 or 86%. Now coming into the top 3, and I think a driver who is a little bit surprised to see this high, is Sebastian Vettel. 15 seasons in Formula One, positive 292.3 over his career, or 110%. Seasons above 100%, 13, so that means he only had 2 seasons where he was below 114, below 100%. And that includes seasons like 2014, where even though he didn't do that well, lost pretty handily in the teammate head-to-head to Ricciardo. Basically, that season was just a hair above 100%, which suggests that a lot of that points deficit to Ricciardo was generated by, the qualifying deficit that he had to his much younger Australian teammate. But nonetheless, best season 2013, don't think anyone would debate that, positive 65.4 or 120%. Worst season 2010, despite the fact he won the championship, it was still his worst season. Vettel had a ridiculous season that year in terms of qualifying, was on pole or the front row almost every race. Quite a few races where he made pretty sloppy mistakes, like the one I just mentioned with him taking out Button. Also took out his teammate in Turkey, but still, nonetheless, managed to keep it together and won the championship in the end. So that negative 27.9 comes out at 90%. Now we're into the top 2, and I think at this point most people can probably figure out who those 2 drivers are. I think most people are probably wondering what the order is. But for now, at least, as of the recording of this video, number 2 is Max Verstappen. 11 seasons in Formula One, positive 435.4, which is a whopping 140 or so points more than Vettel in third. 117% of his career total, which is pretty ridiculous. And all 11 seasons of his F1 career, he's been above 11%. Even the ones early in his career, like 2018, where he seemed to have mistakes the first 6 races. 2016, his first year at Red Bull. 2015, when he was 17 years old and did quite a few, quite aggressive maneuvers, a couple crashes, as like Monaco in there as well. But yes, every single season above 100%. I don't think there's a single driver who's done more than 2 or 3 seasons who basically can say the same. Best season, the one that we just had where he won his 4th championship, 2024, positive 86.6, which is a pretty ridiculous number, 128%. Worst season, 2017, the first year of the really, really high downforce cars that we had with that regulation cycle, positive 0.5 or 100%. So he does get into that 100% line just barely, but still very good by Verstappen. And still he has quite a few less seasons than some of the other drivers on this list. Like he's done 4 seasons less than Vettel, 8 seasons less than Hamilton, 6 seasons less than Button, 8 seasons less than Raikkonen. And the driver at number 1 is Fernando Alonso, who he's basically done half as many seasons as. So for Alonso, number 1 on this list, and again, when you compare the raw total, positive 493.1, it's only about 60 or so less than Verstappen. So if Verstappen continues for another couple years, gets a couple more seasons of, positive 50 or above, that could definitely dethrone Alonso from that number 1 spot. But for now, as of the recording of this video, Fernando Alonso is number 1, 118%, 18 of his 22 seasons above 100%. And even the ones where you look at that aren't above 100%, it's a bit, again, understandable for some of them. So best season, a bit of an unusual one. I thought it was going to be 2012, but no, it's actually 2011, positive 66.1 or 135%. Worst season, 2001, his first season in F1, negative 1.9 or 35%. That was a bit of a tricky one. When you convert to the 25-point system, his teammate Tarso Marquez would have scored 4 points, but Alonso would have only scored 1. And when you look at like the race by race results, pretty much every race where Alonso retired with some kind of mechanical issue, Marquez would basically finish like 10th or 9th in a race where only 10 or 9 drivers finished because of, really poor reliability. When Alonso finished, had a really good result, finished in like 12th or 13th, his teammate Marquez would be in like 16th or 17th. There's only really one race, which I think was the 2001 German Grand Prix, where I think Alonso maybe could have been like 1 position higher. But again, that's kind of, unfortunately, even with some of the corrections I put in the data to try to account for things like that, it still wasn't enough. And for Alonso, he ends up with a negative 1.9 for his first season in F1. Nonetheless, fantastic career for Alonso, and he's got kind of the guy who for many has that reputation for being the guy that you want more than anyone just in a Grand Prix, for absolutely maximizing his points totals. And again, the raw stats kind of back that up. So there you go. There are the top 20 for my expected points model for the past quarter century since the year 2000. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. That really helps things out, and leave a comment below who really surprised you for being on this list, and maybe there was a couple who surprised you for not being on this list. I think one driver who really surprised me, who I thought was going to be on this list but wasn't, was actually your defending Le Mans 24-hour Le Mans winner Robert Kubica. Unfortunately, actually ends up with a career total just below 100%. Had a couple, seasons there where, for whatever reason, the data, I think just really bad luck, he ends up with, totals below 100%. So that's kind of, again, the data, the model is not perfect. There's always going to be things like bad luck that the model can't take into account. There's also going to be, lots of good luck. And if I went by percentages, there'd be quite a few drivers who'd look at and be like, I don't quite think they deserve to be there. But again, that's sometimes the luck of the draw in Formula One. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching this video, and goodbye.